Hello, welcome to Craig Loves to Crochet. My name is Tonya and this is Abby Craig modelling my beautiful neckerchief. I said I was going to do a tutorial showing my Peacock Eye Stitch, and here it is. So as you can see, it's absolutely gorgeous. It has 3 buttons. It's a very classy little item, this. Quite lightweight, but looks really lovely either with a jacket or a pair of jeans. It really is quite gorgeous. So let's get on with the tutorial, and thank you for watching. Let's have a look at what we'll need for this project then. The yarn that I'm using for this project is called Creative Reflection yarn. This is a 50-gram ball, and that's all you'll need for this project because of the nature of the stitch. And the colour is called Party 001. You can get them in lots of different colours, but I love this beautiful sort of cerise pink colour. The yarn is quite a fine yarn, so if you're wanting to use an alternative, I would probably go for like the single knit yarn rather than the double knit just for this project. And the reason for that is just because of the nature of the stitch, it being quite lacy. It really brings out the stitch if you use a finer yarn for this project. The crochet needle that we're going to be using is a number 5, which is quite unusual for using for such a fine yarn. But again, for the nature of this stitch, it really brings out the qualities and the pattern of this stitch. So we're using a number 5 crochet needle. As you'll already know if you've watched my other tutorials on how to create the Peacock Eye Stitch, you will need some kind of dowel or needle. I like to use this lovely lightweight plastic knitting needle, and this one that I'm using is a 20mm needles, but you can choose anything really, and we've discussed that in previous tutorials. I've chosen 3 lovely buttons for my project. These are gorgeous, and those are for the end. We'll need a pair of scissors for cutting our yarn, and I always, as anybody who watches my tutorials, always use a thimble and a yarn needle just for tying in the ends. So let's get started on our project. Right, it's exciting to be using a new sort of yarn. I love using different types of yarns. So to start the project, we start off by creating our chain. So we need to chain 40 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll see you at the end. Right, so we have our 40 chain. Now we're going to crochet our foundation row, and I'm going to do single crochets for this. So we need to chain 1, and then we're going to go into the first stitch to create our single crochet foundation. So I like to go into the two loops rather than the one, and this creates a really solid foundation row. It makes it lovely and neat. It's ideal for using for this yarn as well, or any yarn really, but it really gives a lovely neat edge. So into each loop we're going to go, just creating our foundation row, and as you can see, it's really starting to work up a nice neat edge, which is exactly what you need, a good definition when you're using this kind of yarn. So I'll see you at the end when I've finished my foundation row. Right, I've finished my foundation chain. As you can see, it's gorgeous, lovely and solid, nice and neat. It's ideal for what we want to do next, which is pulling all our loops through for the beginning of our Peacock Eye Stitch, this gorgeous pattern. Now I'm assuming that you already know how to do this, and if you don't, then I have a crochet tutorial which I'll put the links down below for you to see. Just to refresh your memory, this loop here above the counts as our first loop, and we have 40 single crochets all along, so we need 40 loops. So we're going to be working in multiples of 5. When we're pulling our loops through, for the purpose of this pattern, we're going to be going through the 2 loops at the top of each of the single crochet stitches. So I'll just zoom in to show you. So we're going to be going into these 2 loops here, each one all the way along. So let's get started with that. I'll start you off with the first few and then I'll meet you at the end. Right, so with our large needle, we're going to put our first loop on the end of our needle. We're going to catch hold of our yarn. We don't go through this loop here, this very first one here, because this is our first, we've already got our loop on for that one, so we missed that one, and we're going to go into the 2 loops of this stitch here, so into there, into those 2 loops, and we're going to pull up our yarn. So tucking our needle under our arm or wherever you find it the most comfortable, picking up our yarn, pulling it through the top of the loop and popping it on top of our needle. I'll show you again just to refresh. So into the 2 loops of our single crochet, like so, picking up our yarn, pulling it through the 2 loops and then putting it on our needle. Okay, and then just make sure we pull our stitches down. Right, so I'm going to pick up the rest of my loops, so we'll have 40 loops right to the end on our needle. Right, so I have my 40 loops on my needle. Now, as per the tutorial, I need to take my loops off the needle and put my needle aside. So we'll be working on these loops now. Now don't worry, as I've said time and again, not to worry about this because this is not going to come undone. What we do need to do is we need to pick up, because we're working multiples of 5, we need to pick up 5 loops on our hook. So we've got 5 loops here, and we need to catch hold of my yarn. So we just hold it nice and lightly, the other loops in our hand here. We're not going to distort or anything. We need to pull it nice and taut, like so. We need to catch hold of our yarn and pull through all 5 loops and create a single crochet. Now, because this is the first cluster, we need to chain 2, because we're going to be working in a double crochet stitch now into these 5 loops, or we call a treble in UK terms. So pick up our yarn, we're going to create a double crochet. So this is creating our first cluster, our first peacock eye. So into the center here of our 5 loops, we're just going to stitch 5 or 4 more double crochets, because the chain counts as our first double crochet. This ball of wool, the yarn doesn't come from the middle, so I have to keep pulling it. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 more, and that makes 5. Right, so that's our first cluster. So we move along, we pick up the next 5 loops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on our crochet hook. Pull them nice and taut so we're getting a good even pattern, good even cluster. Pulling our yarn through and creating a single crochet, and that connects the 2 sets of clusters. And again, we're going to double crochet, this time 5 double crochets again into here. We don't need to chain this time. So 1, 2, into the cluster, 3. I'm assuming that you know how to do this because you've watched the tutorial, but if you want a refresher, the link's down below. Just pulling my yarn a little bit. I don't know about you, but I prefer it when it comes from, the yarn comes from the middle of the ball. Okay, so now we have our 2 our 2 peacock eye stitches on, so our clusters. Okay, so we're going to do that all the way along until we come to the end, and I'll see you at the end when we've got all of our clusters done. So we're doing sets of 5, multiples of 5, so keep picking up your 5 loops and crocheting in your 5 double crochets into the 5 loop cluster. Okay, so I have finished that row of double crochets and we have formed our first row of peacock eye stitches. Those 2 rows make the peacock eye stitch, and it really is quite beautiful, isn't it, especially with this yarn and this colour. So we should have 8 peacock eye stitches. Each cluster is 5, so 5 loops, 5 double crochets, and we're going to repeat these 2 rows, the loops and the double crochet row, for another 22 times. So we'll have 22 rows of peacock eye stitch. So I'll see you at the end. We're just going to finish off, so I'll let you continue with the 2 rows for 21 more times, and I'll see you at the end. We've nearly finished. Right, I've finished my 22nd row. It's looking really beautiful. Now to finish off, I'm going to do a single crochet, 2 rows of single crochet. You can do this as long as you want, but this generally, I've worked out the sizes for this design, and I've found that 22 rows is ample for my size and the size of my 2 daughters as well. But if you wanted it wider, I guess you could incorporate an extra 5 stitches this way, or if you wanted it longer, then you can incorporate extra rows as well if you wanted a wider cowl or neckerchief, but I've left mine like this. I've also decided just to do the plain single crochet along rather than a shell stitch or something, because I thought the stitch was so beautiful, and I did play around with various edgings, but I found just the plain 2 single crochet rows was just perfect for this design. However, I'm going to be doing a very mini tutorial for a scarf, and I think that I might add a little edging to that. Okay, so I mean, really you need to turn your work around. So we've been working just with our work facing us, so all we need to be doing now is to chain 1, and then we go into our single crochets into the 2 loops of each of the double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Where are you, Stitch? There you are. Trying to find you. Oops, tough little sucker, that one. Okay, 4 and 5. Now we don't need to 1, 2. We don't single crochet into our. Do you remember when we did our single crochets just to connect each of the clusters? We don't do a stitch in there, otherwise we'll be increasing. So we skip the single crochet that we've done here, and we go into our double crochet, and we just do our single crochets all along again. Just pulling my yarn, it's getting a little tight. There we are. And the last of the 5 double crochets there, and again just missing that single crochet here, so we don't need to be going into there, and off we go again. Right, so I'll see you at the end when I've done this row, and then we're going to chain, stitch, turn our work and do another single crochet along. So when I finish doing that, I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've done my my edge here. So we have our 2 edges here, so there's the 2 double crochets, the 2 rows of double crochets here and again on here. Now I've sewn one of my buttons on here. I'm going to show you how we assemble this now. So we take our yarn, our neckerchief, and we fold it like this, like so, and then we bring this end over here like this. Now I've already put 2 buttons on just to show you where I'm going to be putting my 3rd button is going to be here. So basically once you've got your design in the correct position that you want your buttons, so mine's going to be like this, so our neck's going to be going through here, and I'll show you that in a moment. We fold it over like this, and then we know where we need to put our buttons. So we're actually going to be using the little holes here as buttonholes. Why not? Because it seems silly not to really. Then it incorporates the pattern into the design. And this button here at the end here will be going into this end one here. So we'll pop those in like that. And I've just sewn them on basically with the yarn that I've used. And so our next button is going to be going, let me get my button, I'm thinking I'm going to put it here, so that will make our 3rd button just here, and we'll sew that on. So I'll undo these buttons, so I need to be putting it, and I'm actually going to be putting it between these 2 little clusters here. So I'll just undo this first of all, and this one here. We'll fold that back, and we know that we need to put our button here. Let's just double check again. Yep, so it needs to be really in line with the ones that I've already got. So I'm going to sew my button here. You can do whatever you want. I thought 3 buttons looked quite nice, but if you just wanted one big large one, then that would be just okay as well. So let me get my yarn, and I'll just get some scissors and my needle. Excuse me. I'll get some yarn and we'll sew this button on. My eyes are getting really bad, and I have to use a stitch. One of those little stitch things that you have to help you thread your needle now, but these big yarn needles aren't too bad for me, but the little ones have a terrible time. Okay, so basically we just go underneath the work, and you'll need to, if you have a look here, this is where we have like a solid piece of the pattern. So I mean, obviously there's no point in going through the really lacy bits, because your yarn is just going to come all the way through, which is why I've decided to do it on each of the double crochet parts. So we'll just sew that button on. I'll see you when I've sewn it, and that will show you the end result. Okay, so I have all 3 buttons on. If you have a look at the back here, you can see you really can't see the joins at all of the buttons, it just blends in. Okay, so we'll flap our bit down, we'll secure them together. Let's have a look and see how they look when the buttons are done up. Okay, so that is absolutely beautiful. I really love this. It's probably one of my favourite items to date, actually, that I've made in a long time, apart from some of the hats that I've designed. That's absolutely gorgeous. I really love it. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have, it would be so helpful if you could press the like button or make a comment, because that helps me to see where I'm doing things right, and if I need to change things a little bit also. You can join me on Facebook on www.facebook.com Craig Loves to Crochet, and until the next time, I think I'm going to make a scarf, a mini tutorial. Thank you, bye.